Okay, I believe we're live. Good morning, everyone. I'm just going to check on my phone so that I can share. Let's see. Live. Yep, we are live. So let me just share this. Just doing a quick post. Give people time to join. Okay. Typing kind of slow here. Okay, I'll be I'll be right there. Okay, so good morning, everyone. I'm DePel Schmagruder, founder of MOBB United. Um, invite people to join as we come in for our closing conversation for Autism Acceptance Month. I am very excited to have our guest this morning. I feel like this is going to be a selfish session because I feel like I'm going to learn so much from you as we have this conversation, and just look forward to the conversation. So I'm going to read your bio first, Dr. Taylor, and then we'll get into the conversation a bit. So our guest this morning is Dr. Dannette Taylor. She's a family advocate and autism parent coach with over 16 years of experience in special education. And as the mother of a young adult with autism, she empowers families to navigate IEPs and 504 plans in the public school system. Dr. Taylor helps parents move from overwhelm and fear, I can relate to that, to confidence and clarity by creating personalized life plans that support independence, dignity, and joy for our neurodiverse children. I love that, independence, dignity, and joy. Her work is grounded in both professional expertise and lived experience, giving families the tools to build the future their children deserve. And I'm just so excited to have you on the platform and grateful that you said yes. And I just want to share how I found you. Like, I actually found you through your social media posts, which are very engaging. You just kept popping up in my feed, and I got caught up into your videos and advice and your videos with your son Quincy, which are just so precious. And I had to reach you. So I'm grateful that you responded, because people don't always respond to random, social media outreach. So thank you so much for being here today.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for having me.
Yes.
Obviously, your organization was very intriguing to me, right? Moms of Black Boys United. And so it's my pleasure to be here with you this morning. Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank you. We appreciate it. And I just want to share, before we get into the conversation, my shirt that I'm wearing today. It says, "My child has an IEP." But then at the bottom, it says, "Involved, educated parent."
I love that.
And I bought this online. You can find a lot of stuff on social media. So we're going to talk about the role of the parent in our conversation. But first, I wanted you to start. I read a brief bio, but could you just tell us a little bit more about yourself and your journey to motherhood?
Oh, my journey. And I'm going to talk about my journey because as I talk about my journey, you'll learn a whole lot more about me.
Okay.
And
Sounds
so
good.
I am the mother of three sons. I have a 31-year-old, a 25-year-old, and I have Quincy, who is 24 years old. And Quincy is my baby, and he's on the autism spectrum. And just to give you a little bit of backstory, I used to work for the sheriff's office years ago. And when I had Quincy, he was, a normal developing baby, just like my other two boys.
Mhm.
And around 9 months, I started to see a difference in him. And I know this can be very controversial, but it was after him receiving a round of 4 vaccines in one day. And so I know
Mm.
some people are probably not going to be happy about that. And they'll say, oh, well, vaccines have nothing to do with it. And I respect their thoughts, but I also have my own thoughts. And I'm not going to go into too much of that
Right.
today.
And
But
your experience is your experience. So that's just the fact of what happened. That's what happened, right?
exactly, exactly. And so after that round of vaccines, he had a fever and he was sick for about a week. And at
Mm.
that point, I realized that, okay, he wasn't cooing anymore. He wasn't following me with his eyes anymore. He
Mm.
wasn't laughing and smiling anymore.
Mm.
And so I took him to the doctor, and the doctor says, oh, well, things sometimes are just different with different kids, and don't worry about it. But in my gut, I realized that okay, there's something going on here.
Mm.
In any event, 6 months goes by and nothing's changing. He's still the same. And so at this point, I'm worried. A year goes by and I'm talking to family, friends, my husband, and to be quite honest, everybody's looking at me like I'm crazy, right? Oh,
Mm-hmm.
everything is fine, don't worry. But I feel it in my gut and I know it because I know where he was before and I knew where he was
Right.
then.
So it
And so
never changed back like it was.
it never changed back. No, no.
Wow.
And so during this time, I'm obviously frantic and everybody's telling me that I'm the one that has the problem and it's not the baby. And I'm taking him to the doctor periodically for visits. And the doctor is doing his assessments and saying, well, he's still within the benchmark for this. Well, he's still within the benchmark for that.
Right. Yeah.
He's not so far off the mark for the milestones. You don't have to worry.
Right.
Fast forward, he's now 3.5 years old. And at 3.5 years old, at this point, I'm completely confused. I'm baffled because now he's 3.5. He's not speaking.
Mm.
He's not doing anything that a typical 3.5-year-old is doing.
Mm.
And so we go to the doctor's office yet again for another visit. And this time I have a complete meltdown. And I tell the doctor, I don't care what you say. There's something wrong with my child. I don't even know what kind of doctor I should be asking for, but you
Right.
need to give me a referral to somebody. This was back when you had to have a referral to see someone.
Okay.
And so he said, okay. And he gave me a referral to see a neurologist.
Mm-hmm.
And I waited 6 months to see this neurologist because he was supposed to be the absolute best of the best
Yeah.
in
No
my
appointments available, right?
right, right.
Mm-hmm.
And so we get to the doctor's office early. We're waiting. And I don't know what I expected to hear, but I expected to hear something that was going to bring clarity to all of this confusion that was going on in my life.
Right.
So the doctor walks in and he's cold, number one. He's cold. He's cold.
Mm.
And he's in there for less than 5 minutes. And he says, your son has PDD NOS. And I said, what is that? And he takes out a notepad. He writes PDD NOS on it. He hands it to me. He says he has autism. And of
Like
course, I
that.
had heard of autism just like that.
But did
Just
he
like
do any testing, or did he give like some kind of assessment, or he just interact with him for a few minutes?
he just interacted with him for a few minutes.
Okay.
Yes.
Huh.
And I said, okay, well, what is that? And he says he has autism. And of course, he said, you never heard of autism? I said, I've heard of it, but I don't know
I
what
don't
it
know what
is.
it is. Like, if you haven't encountered, what does that mean?
Right, right. And so he says, well, the nurse will come in and talk to you. And out the door he went.
Oh, wow.
And so, of course, at this point, I'm, and my baby's sitting there looking at me like, what is going on here? But the nurse comes in and she says, well, yeah, he has autism. And I said, okay, well, what do you do for that? How do you fix it?
Mm-hmm.
And she says, well, you really don't fix it, but there's therapy to help him learn how to speak. And there's it was speech therapy and occupational therapy were the two things that she mentioned to me. And she said, okay, we're going to give you, this information to a company called Easter Seals, and you're going to take him there and, it'll be okay. And that was the beginning and the end of any guidance
Wow.
I was ever to receive, ever.
No
Okay.
way. So
Yes.
had he started preschool at that point, or like?
At that point, he was going to a Christian pre-K through, 8 school.
Okay. Yeah.
So he was going to school, but it wasn't like, he was there and you could tell he was learning, but you didn't get a whole lot out of him.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
So what happened next?
So of course we took him to Easter Seals, and only God's grace got the best speech and language pathologist ever. Her name was Hedia. I'll never forget her.
Hmm.
And Hedia taught me so many things, and she was wonderful with him. She was wonderful in educating me. And every single session, I had homework that I could do with him at home.
Mm-hmm.
And while the progress was slow, I could definitely see the progress. I mean, like within 2 weeks, I could start to see the progress.
Oh, wow.
And that, where he had no language, that evolved quickly into echolalia.
Mm-hmm.
And so for those of you guys that don't know what echolalia is, it's pretty much when the child just repeats back to you what you say. So I would say, "Good morning, Quincy," and he would say, "Good morning, Quincy."
Mm-hmm.
So we dealt with that for several years. It took quite a while for him to develop his own language, and so he morphed from that into 2 and 3 word phrases for his wants and his needs. I want
Mm-hmm.
juice, I want to eat, those types of things.
Yeah.
And somewhere around 9, he developed language. But during this time, your child gets diagnosed, so now you have the whole IEP process. At 3 and a half, he was able to get an IEP. He started a special needs preschool at
Okay.
4
Mm-hmm.
and it was the Bodwin preschool in Davie, Florida, in Fort Lauderdale area, and that was great as well. That was amazing. He had an opportunity to be in a classroom with kids that had autism and varying disabilities, but also with kids that did not.
Oh,
And
wow.
I think that opportunity to be in an inclusive classroom was definitely a game changer for him.
Yeah, and that's pretty rare, like to have that kind of setup, I think.
Yeah, yeah, and
Mm-hmm.
it was definitely a good experience. So, at this point, it's a I don't want to use the word hardship, but essentially it is. It's a hardship on the family. We
Mm-hmm.
have myself and my ex-husband who did not agree on certain things.
Mm-hmm.
You have me, that mom that I want everything that he's supposed to get, everything that he needs. I want all hands on deck 24 hours with him. And
Mm-hmm.
of course, I have other children. I have 2 other children
Right.
as well. And if I am completely candid, uh, my focus was on the child that needed the most. Did I
Mm-hmm.
neglect the other two? Absolutely not. But I know that that's where my focus was because nobody else's focus was there. If
Right.
that makes
Yeah.
sense. Everybody else was like, don't worry about it. He'll be fine.
Mm.
I can remember my ex-husband saying to me, "Oh, just let him be happy." I'm like, "What does
Mm.
that mean?" Just let him be
Mm-hmm.
happy. He's going to live. He's going to grow. He's going to be an adult one day.
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
we've got to teach him. We've got to try to give him as much as we can possibly give him during these early years because there's a window of opportunity and people don't
Yeah.
realize certain skills. There is a window of opportunity that if you miss that window of opportunity, it makes things, I don't want to use the word impossible, but it makes
Mm-hmm.
things so much harder on
Mm.
your child, on yourself, on your entire family. And for me, I did not want to, miss that window of opportunity.
And can you just elaborate on that a little bit? Because a lot of people may not understand. So when you say there's a window of opportunity, like give an example of something that if you don't do it by, a certain age or stage of life, you may miss it.
So I'll give you a prime example, and this is something that we're still dealing with now, and he's 24 years old.
Mm-hmm.
Reading. So
Mm-hmm.
Quincy has the ability to what I consider to be call words. If he opens up a book, and this is from the time he was about 11 years old, he could open up a book and he could read anything that you put in front of him. It didn't
Mm-hmm.
matter. And not only could he read it, he could spell anything that you could put in front of him.
Mm-hmm.
But comprehension
Yeah.
wasn't there.
My
It
son is
wasn't.
very similar in that regard. They said he had something called hyperlexia, which is the ability to decode words so he can read
Yes.
fluently and yeah, great at spelling, but the comprehension piece.
Exactly. And that's
Mm-hmm.
exactly what Quincy has as well. And so, when you're dealing with that as a parent, you don't necessarily know. And the sad part was I switched careers to go into education when Quincy was 5 years old because I got
Wow.
tired of going to those IEP meetings and I heard the words that they were saying, but I could not put the pieces together.
So you actually changed careers because of your son's situation. So you left the
Yeah.
sheriff's office and went into education. And did you
Yeah.
have to go through additional training and
I did. I had to go back to school and I got a
okay.
master's degree in teaching. So yeah, that in and of itself was a whole a whole
Wow.
experience as well. And so
Mm-hmm.
on top of working, 3 children, wife, all of those things, I added the layer of going back to school on it as well. And it took me some time, obviously, but I finally got my degrees and I got a job in education because
Mm-hmm.
I initially thought that, well, if I got this degree, I would understand everything at this point.
Right.
And the theory was there, but the application
And
wasn't there at all. So
were
we
you
moved.
working in special education?
Yes,
Okay. Wow.
we moved from Florida to Atlanta.
Mm-hmm.
And when we moved here, I decided, well, you know what? Now's a great time for me to get a job in education because I've gotten this degree, but I don't understand still what is happening. And
Mm-hmm.
I've got a job as a special education teacher.
Wow.
And the interesting thing about that was, and people look at me a little bit sideways when I say this, literally, I took a test and this was the state certification, and it was easy to me. It was
Mm-hmm.
easy. Passed it with flying colors. And I had 2 interviews. The second interview I had, they gave me the job. And they were like, yeah, come on in and teach our kids. You're now a special
Wow.
education
And
teacher.
that's it.
And I was like, wait. So no one's going to tell me what to do here?
Right. Like, how do you interact with special needs children? What do you, are there tools? Are there frameworks? Are there
I got nothing.
interesting?
I got nothing. I
And you weren't
literally,
a para, you were a full teacher. Like I can see that for the paras in the classroom,
that's
but
right. Full blown special education teacher. Yes.
mm-hmm.
So I got thrown into the fire, but there were some good mentors around that I learned from. And it really put all the pieces of the puzzle together. I learned more about how to provide what they call specially designed instruction. I learned about accommodations. I learned about different types of learning styles and teaching based on a child's processing strengths and weaknesses. So there was so much that I actually finally was able to connect as a
Mm-hmm.
special education teacher that also supported me with my son at home. But in the same token, I do believe that me being my child's first teacher was so beneficial in me walking into a classroom on the first day and being
Mm.
able to teach other people's children. So that was helpful as well.
That's
So,
amazing. And so
absolutely.
you become a teacher, and then I remember in our earlier conversation you shared how at some point you came to a fork in the road because you were advocating for Quincy, but you were working in education, and
Yes.
those things, like in the beginning, it sounds like it was a benefit, but at some point there was a clash. Can you talk about that?
Yes. So when you have to advocate for your child, sometimes it's not always collaborative with the school district, right?
Mm-hmm.
Especially when you're wanting something outside of what they are offering, right? As long as you're taking what they're offering, there's never going to be a problem. If they're
Mm-hmm.
offering A, B, and C and you're okay with A, B, and C, you're fine. But when you want something else, that's where the problem comes in. And for me, it was that reading piece again with Quincy.
Okay.
He had been using a program called Read 180. That's what they've been using with him for several years, 5 years, for 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
And he had made little to no growth, very, very little growth. And every year they would tell me, oh, well, Mom, he's making growth. And I would say, okay, well, how much growth should he make in a year? What does
Mm-hmm.
the program say he should
Right.
make in a year? And I already knew the answer to that because I taught the same program in the school system. And
Um,
mind you, I'm working in the same school system where my children are going to school, so where he is going to school. And so, they dance around the question, and I would always say, he's supposed to make 1 year growth. That's what he's
mm-hmm.
supposed to make. And so, when you're working with your colleagues, that essentially you have worked with them, you know them, you believe that they are good people. You know that they love children. You know that they care
Right.
about children. But when it comes time for your child, they're not willing to spend the extra money, and that's essentially what it was. Spend
Mm.
the extra money on your child. And I'm, at this point, I'm, putting in 50, 60 hours a week sometimes, making sure other people's children get what they were supposed to get,
Mm-hmm.
but no one was looking out for mine.
Mm.
So we came to a meeting. At this point, he's in high school and he's still reading on a second to third grade level for comprehension.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so we're at a meeting and I'm talking about what his needs are and explaining to them that, he's got to have these visuals still. I understand, where he is, but he's got to have these visuals. And this one special ed administrator, who was a special ed administrator at the time, she says, what do you want us to do? Give him a picture book? And I'm thinking to myself, are you kidding me? So this is the attitude that I'm dealing with. Of course, they're not doing anything that he really needs to help move the needle with him with that reading.
Mm-hmm.
And so He's still struggling with it. At this point, I'm at a disagreement with my employer. And some
Mm-hmm.
people will say, well, that's not a big deal. It's not like it's the same school, it's the same school district. And I really felt like, okay, they understood that I needed to advocate for my son
Right.
until one day, one of the area assistant superintendents showed up at my school. And unbeknownst to me at that moment, he was there to talk to my boss about me and the way that I
Wow.
was advocating for my child.
Wow.
And I hadn't done anything that was unprofessional. I hadn't done anything that any other parent wouldn't do. And I was always very careful. And I will tell you guys, if you have to advocate for your child and you work in that same school system, you be very careful about how you do things, what you do, when you do. I never sent emails during work hours. I never sent it from
Mm-hmm.
my work email.
Mm-hmm.
I never had meetings and did not clock out from work, those types of things, because they will use those things against you if you don't
Yeah,
behave.
for sure. Yeah.
And so I didn't know he was there to talk about me, but about 20 minutes later, my boss comes out and she says, hey, I need to talk to you about something. And I'm like, what is it? And she's like, well, apparently they're not happy about the way you're advocating for your son. And I had made a comment at the very last meeting to this lady. And I said to her, well, are you not wanting to make adjustments for him because he's Black? Because I
Oh,
know this
wow.
district makes the concessions all the time. I work here. I know
Right.
what the
So you know
district does.
what's possible. It's not like you're asking for something you haven't seen before, right?
Exactly.
Wow.
Exactly. And so they didn't like the fact that I brought race into it. But quite frankly,
Oh,
for me, I felt like that's what it was, because I know
mm,
for a fact that what you guys have done for countless families all over the district, but for mine, you wouldn't do it.
mhm,
And so
mhm.
I asked for what they call an independent educational evaluation, an IEE, because apparently they couldn't figure out what was going on. And a neuropsychologist did an evaluation. And it was at that point where I learned about the window of opportunity.
Mhm.
And to make a long story short, he had identified that obviously he was LD in reading. He had a specific learning disability in reading, in addition to the autism. And
Okay.
so when we went over the evaluation, he said to me, the district has been doing an evaluation every 3 years like clockwork. And he says, all of the information was there for them. I don't understand why they did not see it. And he said to me, at this point, Quincy was 14. He says to me, I'm so sorry. He said, I don't know I don't know how much more time Quincy has left to learn how to comprehend what he's reading. And I said, okay, well,
Mm,
what do you mean? He says, well, there's a window of opportunity for you to really learn how to read. He said, for every child, it's a little bit different,
mhm.
but it's give or take, within a certain amount of time. And the expectation is that, you learn how to read earlier. And by the time, he said to me, by the time you're 14, 15, 16 years old, if you haven't learned that skill, it's like slim to none that you're ever going to be able to learn that skill.
Wow.
And so for me, it was gut wrenching, because we know the importance of knowing how to understand what you're reading. I mean, that's
Mhm.
a skill everyone needs, across life. And so that was very a difficult point for me, knowing that, okay, I had been begging at least for the last 5 years to do something different. And of
Right.
course, I dealt with that guilt of myself too. Like, okay, if you didn't work here, you probably would have kicked the door in a long time ago. But because these were people you worked with, because this was your job, you chose to take a more passive approach.
Yeah, I don't know about that. I was gonna ask you about that. I was gonna say the opposite, actually, because I think because you worked there and you were in the system, you knew what was possible, right? You knew that there were other things available, but those of us who don't work in education, we don't even know that. So it's very hard to figure out like how to balance acceptance with advocacy, because you don't, like, I would have no way of knowing that they have these other programs and different ways of learning how to read. So I probably wouldn't have kicked the door down. I would have taken their word for it. This is the program. This is what we use, right? So you definitely shouldn't beat yourself up about that. But that is a question I have. Like, how do you, as a parent, know like how much to accept? Like your ex-husband said, just let him be happy, versus how much to push and advocate, and when to do that.
You know, at if you would have asked me this question 10 years ago, I probably would have given you a different answer than what I'm going to give you now. Right now, there is so much information that is available. There's so much connection and community that is available. It is so much easier right now to reach out to other people and ask questions. You can go into community forums, you can go into Facebook groups, and you can find out all information about everything in the school
Mm-hmm.
system. We have the access to the internet is at our fingertips at this point, where we can do our own research based on what our kids need, as long as we're tapped into what our kids' needs are, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we have
Mm-hmm.
to know, we have to be that first expert on our child. But as you listen in those meetings, I promise you, and people might look at me crazy, your gut is going to tell you if it's right or if it's wrong. Your
Mm-hmm.
gut will tell you. When you sit and you listen, everything has to add up. It has to add up because it's all logical. You can't tell a parent that, well, your child is not making progress, but it's okay. And that's what I mean by that. Like, I
Mm-hmm.
sat for 5 years. So for parents who know that something is not working, if you know it's not working, obviously you want to give anything time to work. But if you
Mm-hmm.
know it's not working, do not allow them to continue to do the same thing year after year and play the let's wait and see game, because schools are notorious for that. Okay, let's just wait and see. Let's just wait and see. Next thing you know, it's 2, 3, 4, 5 years later.
Mm-hmm.
You want to make sure that when you're at these meetings, you're asking for data. Don't let people tell you, oh, I think and I feel. Okay, well, show me why you think and you feel that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and it's got to be more than, oh, well, I'm in the classroom with him every day. Well, that's fine, that's wonderful, and we definitely appreciate you and what you're doing with our children, but I need to see what you see, because right now it doesn't make sense to me.
Right.
And so people have a way of dancing around the data. They have a way of dancing around the information that should really be shared with parents, and parents have to ask for it.
Mm-hmm.
IEPs are supposed to be data driven.
Mm-hmm.
And if the data doesn't show that your child is making progress, you should be asking for something different. And that's really the long and short of it. Because IDEA says that an IEP is supposed to allow your child to make progress. And if your child is not making progress, that defeats the whole point of the IEP.
Mm-hmm.
I would say, one, look for that data. Ask for that data before the IEP meeting. Because
Mm-hmm.
if you sit and someone just hands you something and you're in the middle of a meeting, they probably give you 40 minutes to an hour for that meeting if they're generous with parents. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
you're looking at it, but you don't have time to read and digest that information. So you ask them, hey, send me a draft of the IEP, send me all the data and documents that you will reference and you will discuss during the meeting, at least 3 days prior to, so you have an opportunity to add it to your schedule. And when you get home from work, read this information
Mm-hmm.
prepared, because at the end of the day, parents are an equal member of the IEP team. They're not a bystander. And so parents think sometimes that, okay, well, I'm going to sit and let these folks tell me what they need to tell me. Yes, they're the educator, but you are an equal member of the team. So you have a right to know and have access to every single thing that they have access to. Because how can you meaningfully participate in an IEP meeting for your child if you don't have the information that they have?
Yeah. No, that's a very good point. Very good point. And speaking of data, what are your thoughts on ABA therapy and its effectiveness?
So I think ABA therapy is great. Do I believe that it's best for all children? Absolutely not. And I think that, like everything else, it just depends on your child. I think that it's a great model for most,
Mm-hmm.
but there's some cases where ABA is disastrous for some kids.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I know that ABA is a model, even though they don't call it that, but it's the type of model that's often used in the school system, where you're teaching a skill, you're correcting the skill, you're correcting the skill, you're correcting the skill until they make the adjustment and the behavior is modified.
Mm-hmm.
And so for many kids, that's what they need, right? They need that constant correction. They need that replacement behavior to get rid of those old behaviors or the undesired behaviors. They need that. And I know that right now there's a lot of, um, it's just where some people are saying, oh, ABA is great. Some people are saying ABA is awful and it's traumatizing.
Right.
It depends on your child, because I can tell you this, there are a lot of things that I did with Quincy that I believe that this is the reason why he is where he is, where people now would tell me that that's not what you're supposed to do. Even the whole thing with eye contact. There's this thing now where, oh, you don't force kids to make eye contact. Well, I forced my son to make eye contact. And quite frankly, right now he can make eye contact.
Right. Yeah.
And I'm not telling anyone else to do that. I'm just saying what worked for us as a family.
Yeah.
So, ABA is definitely up to the parent. I do think that parents should do their research. And if you don't know, you try it. There were so many things that we tried that, it didn't work. There were so many things that we tried that didn't work, but we found things that did work. And for everyone, it's different. And what might work for me and what worked for Quincy may not work for your child. And you have to be okay with that. You just have to continue to research until you find what works for your child. But what I can say is this: we definitely need to be intentional. We definitely need to make sure that we are actively making good choices that work for our children as best as we can, because a lot of people are doing okay, well, my child has time. And I promise you all, that time is going to go by so quick. It's unbelievable. I feel like Quincy was 9 months old yesterday. And so we run out of time if we're not careful. And here's one thing I do want to mention, and I've been really intentional about mentioning this to families lately. If your child has behaviors, okay, those significant behaviors, it is important for you to be vigilant about getting those behaviors under control. Because behaviors are the one thing that, as an adult, it doesn't matter what your disability is, it's unacceptable. And it's unacceptable anywhere.
And talk about some of those behaviors what comes to mind.
When especially I'm talking about like physical aggression, verbal aggression. I'm not talking about anything like stimming or anything like that, because honestly, Quincy still stims. He has identified when it's appropriate and when it's not appropriate. And, you guys don't come for me about saying that, because some people are going to say, well, stimming is, is based on your needs and it's what's in his body. And I get that. But frankly, I have taught him to, okay, well, during school hours, if you need to stim, you need to ask for a pass and go to the bathroom and stim. Okay. Because
what is his form of stimming? Because I know it's different for everyone.
He scripts, he paces, and he scripts like really fast. And you can just hear him and you're like, okay, what is he saying? And he is saying different scripts from movies or whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
That's what he does. And it may sound like gibberish if you're not paying close attention to him, but he does that. He scripts and he paces back and forth.
Yeah, my son does both of those, actually.
Okay.
Yeah. Right now he's talking about something about vegan meat and Taco Bell. I don't know where it came from, but always pacing. Yeah.
Yes. So when he starts to feel overwhelmed, he will script. When he comes home from work every day, I know it's been a long day, because he's gonna script for about 20 minutes before he kind of, decompresses.
Right.
So that's important, that, behaviors that are undesirable, that are unacceptable to society, are under control. And again, I'm not talking about stimming. At this point, if Quincy was younger now, I don't know how I would approach that, definitely. But I know that when he was younger, we taught him when and where.
Okay.
Because society was not ready for that. And granted, he's 24, he's not 4.
Yeah.
And so things are a lot different now, but we're still struggling with acceptance and awareness. There's still people that are going to look at you funny, despite, 1 in 36 being diagnosed with autism, and everybody knowing essentially somebody who knows somebody who has a child with autism. They're still going to look sideways. So for me, it was important to give him a place where he could do that without judgment from others, because he recognizes when, you know, people are treating him differently, or looking at him weird. He
Mhm.
definitely recognizes that. So we want to make sure that those aggressive behaviors are distinguished, not distinguished, extinguished as much
Mhm.
as possible before your child becomes an adult. Aggressive behaviors is one. Um, Verbal aggression
Mhm.
is definitely another one. Um, Elopement is one, especially if they
Mhm.
don't have awareness. Those are things
Right.
that you want to get rid of, because even if your child, let's say your child is not going to go to college, they're not going to go to a vocational program, they're going to go to work, right? You
Mhm.
definitely have to have those behaviors under control. Even if your child is just going to volunteer somewhere,
Mhm.
or if you want your child to go to a day program is not going to accept your child if they are eloping, if there's physical and
Yeah.
verbal aggression. They're just not going to do it.
Mm.
So we have to make sure that we work on those behaviors as early as possible. And if you're not making any headway on your own, you've got to get professionals involved, you know, whether or
Mhm.
not it's ABA, whether or not it's, you know, some of the other um, therapeutic models, whether or not it's, you know, things like DIR floor time that help support kids in learning and understanding what they should and shouldn't be doing. It just depends on your child, but you definitely have to do something. And
Mm.
just waiting for them to, you know, grow out of it, because I've heard that, oh, he's going to grow out of it.
Maybe, right? Yeah,
That's not it.
maybe.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, so there's so much I want to cover. So I want to shift to preparing for adulthood. The first thing I have to say is Quincy is an amazing young man. Like, I watched the videos. He has such personality and like a zest for
Mhm.
life and vibrancy. And I'm a fan. So make sure he knows that I am a Quincy fan, and I hope to meet him one day because he just seems so amazing.
Thank you.
So can you talk about some of the life lessons you've tried to teach him along the way? Like, I've seen videos you talking about money and driving and different things. Like, how did you approach that?
So we definitely talk about money. We're still talking about money, and I'll talk about driving and those things. But I want to share one life lesson that
Hmm.
before I get into some of these other like common things. The major thing that I try to instill in Quincy is that sometimes life is hard. It's okay if you fail at something. Failing is just a part of the process, but eventually, if you keep trying, it'll get better, and eventually you'll be where you want to be. So trying
Hmm.
to teach him resilience, and that it's okay that if things don't go the way you want it to go the first time, the second time, or even the third or fourth or 10th time, that's okay. And
Hmm.
so I think that that is a big one, for him, and for me, right? Because at the end of the day, on this journey, we hit a lot of bumps in the road. We hit a lot of obstacles. And sometimes, even as parents, we start to feel defeated, and we think nothing works. We think nothing is going to change. And we start to become so emotional about everything. We completely pull the logic out of it, and we forget that this is a process. It's a
Hmm.
process. It's going to take time. And so while I was teaching him those things, I had to learn those things for myself as well, right? And so making sure that your child understands that it's okay to fail, allowing your child to fail, allowing your child to make the mistake, and being okay with that, not doing everything for them,
Hmm.
not coddling them so much that they don't know what it's like to fail. And there's so many of us that we coddle our children, and it's because it's out of love. It's completely out of love, but we do it so much and for so long that they're 13, 14, and 15 years old, and they don't know what pain feels like. And now they're losing their minds because they have never failed at anything. Mom has always done it for them. Someone has taken care of it, and they don't know what it's like to fall down and have to brush their knees off and get up and start running again. So that's one thing that I definitely want to share, that I
Hmm.
believe is the first and foremost
Yeah.
life
And that
lesson.
applies to all children for sure.
It definitely does. But I'll tell you what, I feel like it applies that way even more for ours, because ours, even it takes them longer sometimes to learn certain things,
Hmm.
and it's harder for them. It's
Hmm.
harder for them. So Yes, you're right. All children need to learn that for sure, and especially ours. And I feel like we have to start teaching that earlier rather than later for
Mm-hmm.
them.
Yes.
So, driving, driving is definitely one of those skills that, is necessary for independence or at least some form of mobility, whether or not it's teaching how to ride public transportation,
Right.
ride share. But an adult, an individual, being able to get from point A to point B on their own without mom Ubering them, like
Mm-hmm.
that is a huge one for independence. And it is such a confidence booster. With
Mm-hmm.
Quincy has only had his license for 2 years now. He's 24. He's only had his license for 2 years. Initially, we did public transportation. I don't live directly near public transportation, so I would have to take him to the bus
Okay.
line. He would have to ride the bus. But in full transparency, he didn't ride regular public transportation. In our county, there was a basically a transportation for people with special needs and the
Mm-hmm.
elderly.
Yes, we have
And
something called
so,
Accessori here in New York.
okay,
Uh-huh.
yes, it's very similar here. And so that's where he started with
Mm-hmm.
the transportation was with the special needs transportation. And
Mm-hmm.
then we branched out to public transportation. And he didn't do that for very long before he decided that he wanted to drive. And that
Okay.
whole driving thing, if you have a child on a spectrum or with a disability, you're probably like I was and thinking, driving, that's probably not going to happen.
Right. Yeah.
And
So how
so,
did you get to the point of being
yes,
willing to even try it?
so let me tell you this story. He was at a program through Voc Rehab, vocational rehabilitation.
Mm-hmm.
This is after high school, and he had gone to this program in Warm Springs, Georgia, and COVID hit, and he came back home. But what they had done while he was at Warm Springs was they contacted me one day and said Quincy wanted to learn how to drive, and I'm like, I don't think Quincy is going to be able to drive. I don't think he has the cognitive ability to learn how to drive.
Right. Yeah.
Yes, and so the counselor said to me, well, mom, you can't really make that decision. You don't know, but there's an assessment that we can give him. And I'm like, really? I didn't realize that there was an assessment you can give to see if someone has I guess, the cognitive shift and the
Right. To
ability to learn how
drive.
to drive.
Yeah.
So that was
Me
all new
either.
to me. And so I
Yeah.
was like, yeah, sure, go ahead, give him the test.
You're like, he's not going to pass this
That
test.
I honestly did not believe that. And I'm not one that's very negative in when it comes
Right.
to what he'll be able to do, but that is one thing that I honestly can say that I was not on board with him,
Mm-hmm.
being able to learn how to drive, and I didn't think he could learn how to drive.
Right.
I just
Wow.
didn't. And so she said, okay, we'll give him the assessment. And she called me like 2 weeks later and she says, oh, mom, Quincy passed the assessment. He can learn how to drive. And at this point, I'm like, what do you mean? I said, well, he's got to get a permit first. And, me going back to his comprehension issues, right?
Right. Yeah.
I'm thinking to myself, it's going to take him forever to pass that test. And so they took him to take the learning permit test. They studied with him for a few weeks. And to be honest, he had been studying at home before, learning
Okay.
the signs on the road and those types of things. But I
Okay.
figured he
Oh, Quincy.
passed the signs with flying colors, but the other portion was going to be a disaster. She called me back and she said, well, Quincy passed the written portion too.
Wow.
And so at this point, COVID hit, so they didn't have an opportunity to teach him how to drive. But after COVID, I contacted Voc Rehab again, and they said that he wouldn't be able to go back to the program. They're doing so many things online now, yada, yada. And
Mm-hmm.
I said, okay, well, how do I get help with teaching him how to drive? And she says, oh, mom, yeah, there's a company called Freedom Mobility that they teach people with various disabilities how to drive.
Okay.
So they
Wow.
granted him, they paid for I think it was like 40 hours, if I'm not mistaken,
Mm-hmm.
of driving instruction. And I mean, at this time, I want to mention I'd never put Quincy behind the wheel of my car. That had
Yeah.
never happened. And his dad had tried to teach him how to drive on several occasions. And at one point he was like, Dannette, it's not going to happen. I said, okay,
Mm-hmm.
no problem. You
Mm-hmm.
tried, that's that. And so they, Voc Rehab granted the 40 hours and they assigned someone, and the lady was absolutely amazing. And they gave him 40 hours, and his 40 hours ran out, and he was not ready to take his license yet, get his license
Mm-hmm.
yet. So I was like, okay, well, all right. So I thought to myself, well, I could say that, oh, well, you didn't learn how to drive, but I knew how much he wanted to drive. And, the instructor told me, she said, he's not ready to take the test yet, Mom, but just give him a little bit more time. He's going to learn how to drive. And so
Okay.
I started scouring the internet looking for driving companies. I was calling company after company. And of course, I'm always disclosing his disability, right? Because that's
Mhm.
important to give people all the facts up front. Some people say, well, I don't want them to treat him any kind of way, because for me, I need you to know all the facts, because I don't want you to misunderstand who he is
Right.
and treat him a certain way, or not treat him a certain way,
Yeah.
because you don't know
They
everything
could
about
misinterpret something he's doing or saying.
exactly.
Mhm.
Exactly. So it took about 10 phone calls, and I finally found a company where the gentleman said, ma'am, I have the exact person you need that's going to be great with your son. And so I paid the $1,200, and they gave us more lessons. And the driving instructor, she was really great with him. She was patient with him. And I figured, we had another 40 hours of driving lessons is what I had paid for. And I
Mhm.
figured, okay, well, we're going to do this and we're going to see how it goes. And before those hours ran out, the driving instructor called me and said, Quincy's ready to take his driving test. And I said,
Wow.
what do you mean he's ready to take the driving test? He can't be ready. She says, no, Mom, he's ready. I said, but we haven't even
Wow.
used all the hours yet. I'm pretty sure we have like 6 or 7 hours still left. And she's
Mhm.
like, he's ready to take the driving test, but she said, I will finish these hours with him, but
Yeah.
he's ready. And so they finished the hours, and she said, okay, well, would you like me to set up the date and the time? And I'm like, no, I'll set it up. And I tried to drag my feet about it, but Quincy was like, Mom, I'm ready. And so we scheduled the test. He went and took his driver's test. And again, you guys, I'm still waiting for the ball to drop, because I'm like, no, this
Mm.
is probably not going to happen. And
Mhm.
he comes back and he's so excited. He's
Ah,
my best. And I look
Merry
at the
Christmas.
driver.
Amazing.
And
That's
I
amazing.
said, he finished. He says, yep. And he only made one error, Mom. He's ready. And so driving is a huge one. Driving is a
Mhm.
huge one. I also think that daily living skills, so things that we do every day that we take for granted,
Yeah.
has to be explicitly taught to our kids.
Mhm.
So, I had someone say to me, how can you be a mom? You let your son do everything for himself. Well, yeah, I do. Because one
Mhm.
day I'm not going to be here, number one. One day
Yeah.
I'm not here to do it. One day I won't be capable of doing it. But
Right. Yeah.
more importantly, this young man wants to be independent. So you can't be
Mhm.
independent and not know what it takes to uh, run a household day to day.
Yeah.
So every Saturday, you might hear him in the background getting ready in a few minutes. He's getting up. He's going downstairs. He's looking in the refrigerator. He's looking in the freezer. He's looking in the pantry. He's making his grocery list. He's
Okay.
heading out. He's looking in the matter of fact, he's also looking in our laundry room where we keep, like, toilet paper, paper towel, those types
Mhm.
of things. He's looking to see everything that is needed. And he's heading out he makes his rounds. All these
Driving.
Walmart and Publix. I don't know why
Okay.
he chooses to go through to all of those stores, but he does. And I let him do his.
Okay. Maybe he has certain things he wants from each one. I don't know.
Yes. And so he does his own grocery shopping. Um,
Amazing.
I opened up a bank account for him when he was very young. He probably had a bank account from the time he was 8 years old. By the time he was 12, gave him the debit card, taught him how to use it. Of course, initially they think it's endless money, but it's not endless money. Okay,
Mhm.
how much money do you have on your card? You want to buy something? How much money do you have on your card? Do you have enough?
Right.
Even, well, not now so much, because he totally understands it now, but when he first started, like, doing this whole thing on his own, grocery shopping, etc. Okay, how much money do you have in your account? Do you have enough money to buy all the things that you need? You have to watch to see whether or not you're going over budget, those types of things.
Mhm.
So budgeting is definitely one of them. Obviously, we all like to have fun, but even as adults, you got to make sure you have enough money to pay your bills and those types of things before you
Mm.
have fun. So for Quincy, okay, you want to go roller skating, you want to go to Mount Asian, ride the go-karts. How much money do you have? How
Mhm.
much money did you put away? Like, so we're talking about all of these things constantly. And it was not a one and done conversation. It's an everyday conversation, incorporating all of these things in life. Um,
Wow.
knowing how to clean your bathroom, knowing how to do the dishes. If the knob on the cabinet gets loose, he knows that he has to get the toolbox and tighten up the knob. He knows how
Wow.
to change the air filters in the AC unit. He knows that, okay, well, I have to make sure I have the right AC filter because they're different sizes. So when I go to Walmart to buy an AC filter, do I have the right one? So you have
Mhm.
to teach your kids all of these things, changing the battery in the fire alarm and the smoke alarm.
Mhm.
So it's really important that we take time to sit down and think about all the things that just come naturally to us,
Mhm.
prepare our kids for it. And some things you're going to miss. And I'll give you a prime example. We had a tornado watch the other day. And so his phone started going off to tell us that, there's a tornado watch in the area, and it went off on mine too. And I was like, okay, that means now we have to take cover. Well, we hadn't had a tornado watch around here for, I think Quincy might have been a little boy. And that was not
Yeah.
something that I had on the list of things
Yeah, that's not
to
something
teach.
you'll just naturally think of.
Exactly. So just trying to be intentional about making sure you cover everything, but also knowing
Mhm.
that you can never cover every situation,
Yeah.
right? And so
I
just,
wanna back up on that point because we don't have a lot of time left, and I know one of the big things that you, are a proponent of is creating a life plan.
yes.
So talk to us about creating a life plan for your neurodiverse children. What does it look like? What does it mean? What's the process? What are the things you think about?
So the life plan, I'm going to tell you what step one is. Step one is your mindset. So in order to create a life plan, you've got to be able to create a vision in your mind for your child. And when I say create a vision, I don't mean hoopla, like, oh, this is going to be wonderful, but a real vision of where you see your child, understanding who your child is, not avoiding the elephants in the room, right? So with my son, I knew for sure there's still communication difficulties with him, right?
Mhm.
So when I was looking at his future, and I started creating this long before adulthood. I started this around age 7. And this was a process that took about 4 to 5 years for me to complete. And so when you're looking at that life plan, you have to decide, okay, where do I see my child? Where do I see my child? A lot of us, our mindset is not where it should be. Some of us are, oh, I'll be there for my child forever.
Mhm.
Well, that's not even doable. Okay, so you have to make sure that you're thinking long term. You're thinking about where my child could possibly be based on what I know about my child now. Okay, so
Mhm.
your perception matters. Your perception matters. And the
Mhm.
main thing that I want to share about your perception is that if you have limiting beliefs about your child, if you have fears about your child in the future, you have to first change your mindset. You have to first get rid of those fears. You have to get rid of those limiting beliefs, those things that keep your child and you from moving forward before you can even try to sit down and do this. That's
Yeah.
number one. The second thing that you have to do is you've got to have that vision, like I said, and you've got to create that big picture. Where do you see your child, not only tomorrow, but 5 years, 10 years, 15 years down the line? Okay.
Mhm.
And you're essentially going to use a process of backwards design to get them from where they are now to where you would like them to be.
Mhm.
So you're going to create those long-term goals. You're going to create short-term goals, and you're going to create benchmarks. Those benchmarks are going to get you to the short-term goals. Those short-term goals are going to get you to the long-term goals, and those long-term goals are going to get you to that vision. Okay.
Mm.
And then you have to begin to take action. Okay. Because at the end of the day, if we become paralyzed by our fears, by our limiting beliefs, nothing is going to happen. And the next thing you're going to know is they're going to be 25 trying to figure out, okay, what am I going to do now? Because he's 25 years old. The school is no longer a support, a safety net. And realizing that as they get older, once they leave school, resources are slim.
Mm.
Resources are slim to none. And the resources that are there, like in Quincy's case, they have resources for those that are more severe, but not necessarily for him. And you
Right.
also have to, and I want to say this too, because this is important, even as a part of the life plan. When you can't find the resources and you've looked high and low and you've searched everywhere, sometimes you got to look in the mirror. And that's what I've realized.
Mm.
Sometimes you are the resource and you have to be the resource that provides the support not only for your child, but those in your community. Okay. And I know that's a lot, especially when
Wow.
you're in the
Yeah.
middle of something, but know that as a part of the big picture of your child's life plan, you might need to be that resource. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And the last piece of it, so I mentioned perception, I mentioned the vision, I mentioned taking action, and the last piece of it is empowerment, making sure that you have the knowledge and the tools that you need, as well as those resources to create that life plan.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people are looking for someone else to give them the answer. The answer starts with you. The answer starts with you. If your child has communication problems, you know that not only do you have to have speech and language therapy in the community, they need to be getting it in school, and you need to be reinforcing those skills at home. And
Mm-hmm.
so if you have a child that's getting speech therapy, you need to be asking that speech and language pathologist at the school, okay, what are you working on so I can reinforce that at home? And how can I incorporate that into my everyday life? Because you don't need to sit down at the table necessarily to reinforce communication skills. You
Mm-hmm.
can be in the car, you can be in the grocery store. Those are things that you can always do. If your child is in private speech and language therapy, again, if that SLP is not giving you homework, ask for it. Ask for it. So many times we're sending our kids to these therapies, and that's the beginning and the end of it. They go up with someone else, and you expect them to come back and everything will be fine 2-3 years down the line. That's not it. You got to get the most bang for your buck by immersing yourself in the process as well.
Mm-hmm.
So those are the main components of that life plan. Um, it's the perception, it's the vision, it's the action, and it's the empowerment. And,
And
and
I know
that's
you work with families, right? You work with families on developing this. So, with the time we have left, tell us about your, your offerings, and if someone wanted to work with you, how would they go about it? And do you only work with families in Georgia, or, what is your footprint?
Absolutely. So I am in Georgia, but I don't only work with families in Georgia. Most of the work that I do is virtual.
Mm-hmm.
I would love to meet one-on-one for my clients that I have here or those that want to fly in. I'm definitely open to that. But I provide one-on-one support for families to help build their future plan for their child. So it doesn't matter where the child is on the spectrum. It doesn't matter if the child is 5 years old or if the child is 15 or 25 years old. We help with planning for the future. Um, you can find me on social media. I'm at Dr. Dannette Taylor on all handles.
Mm-hmm.
But at the end of the day, what I do is individualized and is personalized for the family. The life plan is not just for the child. Obviously, the core of it is the child. But when you create a life plan, you have to keep your family in mind, because the last thing we want to do is create a plan that doesn't work for the family, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because then you just have something on paper that you can't execute. So what I do is I make sure that one, we have a plan, one, it is a doable plan, and it is a plan that does not create overwhelm, because as a part of the plan, I help parents reduce overwhelm and get clarity and confidence.
Mm-hmm. That's amazing. So find Dr. Dannette Taylor on social media. I'm going to follow up with you. There's so much we didn't get to cover, but
I know, I can't believe
I we'll have to do a part two, because I feel unprepared, overwhelmed, and often like a failure as a parent, honestly, on this journey, because I feel like I've tried so many things and I haven't seen like the progress that I'd hoped for. My son obviously has autism, but also an intellectual disability, which I think changes the picture a little bit. But yes, I would love to follow up with you to have a conversation
I would
about this.
love that. And I hope you know that as long as you're trying, it's never a failure. And I totally understand the feeling, but I'm here to remind you today, it is not. It is not. And at some point, you're going to see the fruits of your labor. It has to happen.
Thank you so much. Is there anything else you want to say in closing?
I just want to tell everyone out there, if you are having a difficult time with a child, especially if they are on the spectrum, stay positive, stay hopeful. The journey, it's one journey that only you are on it, and you get as much support as you can, but I totally get it as a mom that you feel alone on it. And yes, it's your journey because it's your child, but please make sure that you seek out support, whether or not that's from a therapist, whether or not that's from a pastor, whether or not that's a friend that is just a listening ear, or someone else that understands. Right now, we have a lot of communities in different places and spaces. Join a community so that you are not on this journey alone.
Yes. And MOBB United is one of those communities that you can join. So join us at mobbunited.org. Thank you so much. This has been such a rich conversation. I encourage everyone to share it. It will continue to live on our platform, so it will be there for people to learn from and access indefinitely. And we just thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Hope to see you soon.
You too. Take care.